Shadow of things to come. Here's a quick holy day outline. You got your spring holy days and your fall holy days. Passover represents the sacrificial death of the Messiah. It's our justification. It's our individual justification. We choose individually to have this. Unleavened bread represents the sinless life of the Messiah. It also represents our sanctification. Removing all the leaven out. Leaven represents sin. So it represents our the Messiah's sinless life, and it represents our sanctification.
And sin is transgression of the law.
Sin is transgression of the law. That's picturing us removing breaking God's law from our lives. That's the whole point. The Feast of First Fruits represents the resurrection of the Messiah. I say of the Messiah because it's unleavened. It's unleavened. That means sinless. The Messiah is sinless. He didn't sin. He rose from the dead on the Feast of First Fruits. That's the unleavened resurrection. That's the Messiah's resurrection. This was the first fruit. This first fruits was unleavened bread, unleavened wave sheaf. Pentecost, it represents our glorification. I say it that way because Pentecost was the day they gave the law. So if you do the timeline, when God, the Ten Commandments, that was Pentecost. The law was designed to change us. It didn't work. But it's also the day God gave His Holy Spirit on Pentecost. The Holy Spirit did change us, but we still have our old sin nature. Right? I believe it's also going to be the resurrection of believers on a future Pentecost. Because that's glorification, when we're given a new body that's incorruptible, raised in glory, raised in power, and raised a spiritual body. Now, we don't have that sin nature. We are perfected. So that's the whole process. All that, I think, is what Pentecost pictures. First fruits during Pentecost was leavened. This pictures us being sinful. First fruits was also the wheat harvest. And we're always called the wheat. In every parable, we're the wheat. So the connections are pretty interesting, to say the least. Feast of Trumpets represents a warning from God. Hearken to the sound of the trumpet. This is warning us of the Great Tribulation, of judgment coming. The Day of Atonement represents the judgment of nations. See the difference between Passover and Atonement? Atonement is the judgment of the nations. Passover is individual, atonement's national. It's the removal of national sin. The Feast of Tabernacles, it represents the millennial reign. That's going to be the greatest time on earth, when the Messiah is ruling and reigning. And finally, the 8th day of the Feast of Tabernacles represents the Great White Throne Judgment, where the dead, small and great, stand before God. The dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works.